Right, hello, how are we doing? So today I'm going to be talking about distance and why I think that your next goal should be speed, not distance. And we're all getting into a marathon season. I've got a lot of clients who are actually doing marathons as well. And for any of you who are watching this, then obviously wishing you the best of luck because it's a massive goal and it's a really exciting distance to achieve. And some of you may know, if you've seen some of my posts before, that I was also supposed to be running an ultra this weekend, and I almost did. I got up to 26 miles in my training. The actual distance was 29. I thought it was 30, but it's actually 29. And then last Saturday, I pulled a muscle in my back. And it was one of those just random little things where I just bent down to switch a light on in the morning when I got up. And next thing I knew, I couldn't move an hour later. So that was just a bit of a disaster. But whilst, I'm disappointed about that, yeah, I'm not devastated because I know there's going to be lots of opportunities in the future for me. So just saying hi to someone. So but what I had been doing over the course of the training that I'd been doing over the past 6 months really, was really starting to look quite closely at my running journey because this is something that I always do. When I'm involved in a project, I really pay attention to how I'm feeling, how I'm finding something, and sort of observing what's going on. And when I first decided back in September to sign up for an ultra, I was really excited about there. I think there's a real big kudos to doing distance. It's a monumental achievement and really celebrated. And there's no doubt that it's a massive challenge. It takes a lot of training, a lot of commitment. And I fully intend to do some longer distance runs in the future. But I wanted to talk what I'd observed about the process as I've been going through it and how I was feeling about it as I was training, and more particularly towards the end, as I got to those really long, multiple hour runs week after week. And I really got the sense that, and my background, just for those of you who may not know me, is strength training. So I am someone who has been strength training for quite a long time, was strength training before as a runner, and then strength took a gap in between when I was going through perimenopause and stopped running, really went into strength training, became a personal trainer. And when I restarted again a few years ago, when I just was in my early 50s, came to running as someone who'd just been doing a lot of strength training for a few years. And that was my job as well. And so in my mind, felt like I was in great shape to run. But even despite all that as a background, and I've really trained consistently ever since then, as I got into the long miles this time, I really got this sense that I was beating my body up. There was a satisfaction of being able to go longer and longer, but it was always like a mental thing more than anything else. I was proud that I'd been able to stick out running for 4 hours as much as the feeling in my body. And, whilst I was, able to get the mile to be able to get the miles in, you have to go really sort of slow and steady to just be able to hit that endurance. And I just got the feeling that, you know, that was really quite changing how I was running. It just felt quite unnatural to have to really slow myself down into this plodding speed that I needed to be able to do to be able to run for 5 or 6 hours, which is what I was training up towards, to do. And and that really sort of started to take the energy out of how I was running. By the time I got to sort of, quite deep into those runs, you start to really stiffen up, or I started to really stiffen up, and you start to feel a bit like I was running like a robot, and because things were just tightening up as I went. But of course, you have to carry on, and mentally, you're almost in the game mentally just to stick it out and keep going and keep going. And what I was finding that as I was running, I would quite often be overtaken by people who were doing probably shorter distances than me, and in a lot of cases, younger runners, and looking quite enviously at people who were running in this nice, fast, bouncy way. And I started to really find myself craving to have that type of experience rather than just this slow, steady grind and plod that was really, quite taking it out of me. And what was quite interesting was when I set out to do the ultra, I almost had this mind of this imagination that by the time I got to do it, I'd be feeling really fit, really strong. And that really wasn't the case. It's quite interesting. It didn't really feel like it changed my fitness a lot. I feel like it changed my mind. It changed my mental strength a lot because, like I say, that felt like the big achievement that I actually could go out there and keep going and just endure that whole thing. But it was, there was more of a sense of relief that that was over with. And then there was this huge focus then on actually letting my body rest and recover. Because like I said, I really did feel beaten up. I was never in a lot of pain. I wasn't running on injuries or anything like that that was doing myself harm. I don't mean that. But just that sort of stiffness and just really feeling that repetition. And I did recover quite well, but I did have to make sure that I gave myself a good few days afterwards to recover, really sort of dial into my nutrition, to my hydration. I knew I was never going to sleep very well after that long run, so you're sort of picking up for that later on in the week. And you know, so it's quite interesting. And as I got right up towards like my peak miles, I was finding that I was ending up missing a few strength training sessions or going lower because I could feel that I was tired still. And I definitely wasn't as strong as I was when I was started, which makes sense because when you do a lot of miles, your body does start to break down the muscles and you lose muscles. And there's only much time or energy in the day. And I'm 54 and I work. And the truth of it is, it does actually take longer to recover now, and I just have to accept that's a fact. And then, so when you're trying to maintain that long running schedule on a weekend, sometimes something's got to give, and if I wasn't feeling 100% or hadn't slept, it was always the strength training, because the running was the priority, which is fine because that was the goal at the time, to be really focused on the running. So that has the distance, I should say. So that really has to be what you orientate things around. But knowing that I was, maybe starting to pull back on the training volume that I would be doing from a strength, plus these increased mileage that I was needing to do, I know professionally that starts to compromise your strength. And something else that I, found, you do stiffen up for a few days after as well. So more mobility work, and definitely find personally the amount of carbs that you have to eat, or I had to eat on those long runs, really bloated my body. And I felt okay when I was running. I could just sort of manage to keep on top of that. So there's not really any major digestive discomfort, but the inflammation from the recovery period that I was in, plus all the carbs, meant that I was just really feeling quite bloated for a few days, and taking quite a long time to recover from that before you start the whole process again on your next long run. And certainly over the period of getting into the sort of end section of the training where the miles ramp up, really noticed there were some changes in my body composition. I'd gained weight. I'm the sort of person who's more pear-shaped, so I would gain weight, not just on my tummy, but more sort of everything from the waist downwards. And I did go on HRT at the same time, which I'll talk about again if anyone's interested. And that causes bloating. I'd been on it before, so I knew that. So it's hard to say how much was the runs, how much was the HRT. But that body composition change was just quite interesting because it was noticeable, and that will just reflect the change in training. And there is a link between body composition changes, less muscle, more fat when you're stressed, and more miles of running is more stress on your body. So there's a few things that would go on there that I would be able to attribute to, reasons why my body was changing. But it's interesting because as I was doing it, and whilst I was looking forward to the actual event of the ultra, being in a lovely place, that was the motivation for me really with doing longer distances, was to see lovely places, and just go into magnificent countryside and see things and just be there and moving. And that for me is really exciting. But what I was also noticing as I was really doing these long runs, feeling the pounding on your body, feeling the repetition on there, and a lot of time to think about things. I can't listen to music when I do anything, so it's just me and my brain. But I really started to feel that my goals were changing or shifting because of what I was experiencing. And it surprised me because I was shifting away from distance. So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but just want to talk about a bigger picture because sort of a subtext to this is understanding how menopause and the aging process is changing how we run as runners, you know. The changes to our muscles, the changing to our muscle mass means that we can we slow down, we've got less strength, we've got less power. We've got changes with our proprioception, which is our ability to sense where our body is in space and control movements finally. I noticed changes to my feet and ankle strength, my balance. I felt very ploddy. My feet were getting stiff. You could really sort of notice that things in your body weren't functioning as well as they were or they used to, and just noticing how that was impacting my running sort of more generally. And these are very common things. Another thing that I notice with myself and with other people is because I'm always watching anyone when they run. Don't ever run past me because I'll be evaluating everything. But is the difficulty in maintaining really good, really upright posture. And certainly when you're running for a really long time and going up a lot of hills, that the training roads that I was doing were really hilly. It's very, very hard to maintain that really good posture. Over the amount of time that you're running, you want to be in maintaining good form for as long as you can. And that just becomes harder and harder as you get older. And I think, the actual mechanics of running long distance do start to encourage this slowing down as well, because that's what long distance means that you need to do. You need to slow down. It becomes harder to maintain your posture. You're going to be putting your body under a process that's going to be harder for it to hold on to muscle. There's very little demand for you to use power when you're running slowly. It's just those slow, ploddy things. So these changes that we see as women, as we go through menopause on our running, very much noticed these things myself since I've come back to running and, seeing how I responded to the ultra training. So, and like I say, these are just me observing things. But what I don't want to be, and the reason I do what I do really as a personal trainer, is that I'm very, very motivated not to let age and not to let hormones slow me down. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not accepting the aging process. I do. But what I don't want to do is just be doing the easy thing or not the best thing to actually give myself the best chance of maintaining as much of my full physical function as I get older. And that really is about leveraging the power of exercise, leveraging the power of nutrition, because they are phenomenal tools that we have. And, when we talk about challenging aging, it's really just knowing that if you do the right things, you train in the right way, you eat in the right way, you can really genuinely offset a lot of the changes that you experience as a runner when you're going through menopause. The loss of strength, the loss of power, the ability, the agility, the loss of sort of motor skills, those things can all be reversed. And this is not just me saying it as a random thing, it's like scientifically proven. You can reverse them and slow them down very dramatically. So I was grinding out all these long miles. I started to decide, and this is what my focus is now going into spring and summer, is to really focus on speed and power. So that means it will be looking at running shorter distances. And I'm not a fast runner, by the way, naturally. So it's just me starting from where I am and seeing what I can improve on. But doing much shorter distances and just structuring my training. So I'm more focused on not just grinding out the miles, doing the same old thing for longer, but really changing the way my body works, because we lose power faster than we lose strength. And, the long miles, like I said, don't let you train power back in. So I want to bring that back in. Running repetitively for 4 or 5 or 6 hours doesn't teach your body anything about using new skills or getting more skilled at movement. And when you look at running and what you need to run, you need to be skilled at movement. And that means that you're using all these small muscles, you're fine-tuning your proprioception, you're improving all your motor skills. And that's a different type of training than just doing the same thing for 4 hours in the same direction. So there's, that will involve things like mobility, mobility, plyometrics, some more dynamic training, that sort of various agility drills and movement drills that you can do to train your body to move and to move well again. And that's really important to me. Because I'll be doing more shorter sessions and speed work, I'm going to be cross training. I've got a bike, I've a watt bike in the house, I've got a gravel bike, and obviously I've got 2 legs that I'll run with. So I'll be doing both of those, and I'll be focusing on increasing my VO2 max. So that will be introducing more short sessions like sprint sessions and interval sessions to help improve VO2 max, because that's another thing that long running doesn't do. When you just focus on endurance and long running, your VO2 max will drop over time unless you're actually doing something and structuring something in your training to actually work on improving your VO2 max. And the only way you can improve your VO2 max is by doing the high intensity training as well. Which frankly, I didn't really have the energy to do much of. Did a little bit of speed work, but nothing that would have really shifted the dial on my VO2 max as I was training for the long runs. And that's a really important predictor of longevity. And this is, I hear it's not something that's I've experienced personally, but I do know a lot of women who found as they've gone through menopause, they become more breathless. And part of that is to do with a few things. Lungs can get a little bit stiffer because of the less estrogen. Posture can affect you so that you're not using your breathing muscles correctly. But also it can be the fact that your VO2 max is dropping because you're not training it to elevate it. So this new power and speed training phase is going to allow me to incorporate that cross-training aspect into it. That's going to help me, not cross-training, so the VO2 max training as well. Some of you who may know me or may have read some of my posts will know that I struggled a lot with tendon issues, which is very common in menopause as well. And that's just simply because just the estrogen impacts the stiffness, and just it linked into that whole decline in collagen in our bodies and protein. So one of the reasons that I started back up on HRT, I take collagen. I also time my collagen around my workouts because there's some evidence to suggest that that can actually help with tendon integrity. But also very specific exercise to help me strengthen my tendons, because if anyone's experienced tendon issues, I don't know if you have, it's not a quick thing to fix. And I've learned that the hard way because I didn't know any different. And that's a big focus of my training now. And part of the way that you strengthen training is with strength training, but you have to use specific types of strength training and specific types of tempos to actually reach the tendons and impact the tendons. The other way that you impact tendon health and tendon elasticity is with plyometric training, which is really important. It's a key component of speed, but you have to be very, very careful how you actually introduce it, because all of the things that you would do to change your strength, to change your power, to change your speed, fall into quite an intensive category. And you need very small doses of those with plenty of recovery time to actually allow yourself to adapt without injury. Particularly now, you have to sort of slow down and give yourself more recovery time as well to allow you to adapt without injury. So these are all the things that I am going to be doing as part of my next phase training. I don't think I said I was going to do more strength training, which I am. So up until the training for this ultra was 2 times a week. I'm going to be going up to 3 times a week. I'm going to be adding plyometrics into there. As I say, shorter runs, more sprint type sessions, both on the bike and running, and mixing between the bike and the running, that will allow me to get a little bit of extra VO2 max stuff in without stressing out my tendons too much, so they can adapt a bit more. And building in between that, the skills training, the dynamic stuff that you need to do that really starts to bring back some of the neuromuscular function to your body that's really important, that I can definitely sense that I've lost over time, and that you're not, and that I knew I wasn't getting from just doing more of the same as I ran longer. So that's going to be a 12 to 16 week program for me. And that's idea of doing this. I've got distance in my mind as part of this for longer. But I know from the experience that I've just had with the ultra, I wanted to feel a lot stronger on those ultra runs, or on those, whether I go ultra or not, it doesn't matter. But it's a good way to cycle your training, that you do a distance run, you do a distance training block. Then I'm going into a strength and power training block. I'm going to work really hard on that to bring my strength levels up, my power up, my speed up, my fitness up, my VO2 max up. So then the base level for all of those things is higher for when I decide to do my next longer run. So I'll be starting from a stronger base for that. So I'll get up to a long run, then I'll finish the long run. I'll go back and spend a couple of seasons building the strength and power. And that's how I'll cycle through things, so that as I do the distance, I'm not just breaking down my body and really struggling with the recovery. I'm actually building my body up all the time. And that becomes the strategic plan that I'll have over the different seasons in different ways to train. And in terms of the changes that I would expect to see on this, and I am going to be sharing this on social. I'll talk more about my journey. I'll talk more about what I notice. I am expecting to feel that I bring more control and fluidity of movement back through the type of training I'm doing. I know I'm going to be getting stronger. That's an easy thing to measure, because that's just a question of tracking the weights that you can lift. I'm going to get faster at running, and I'll be doing tests on that. So I'll be testing how fast I am now on a kilometers to start with, and then just look at retesting myself every month to see how that is changing. And then I'll be prioritizing. I've not decided whether to go for a 5 or 10K. I want to do a half next year, but go for a fast half, and just not decided when to put those different things in the calendar just yet. But that's what I'm going to work towards: a fast 5, a fast 10K, and then a fast half. And really key now is better running form and movement skills. I think that form and running skills is a really undervalued component of training. It's not something that I was ever taught to do at school. It's not something that a lot of standard, a couch to 5K, type of thing training plan would actually give you. And I think I didn't need it in my 30s, but I think in my 50s, I really do. Because I know if you don't train things, you lose them. And if I'm not specifically training running skills and form, I'll lose them. If I'm training strength, I'll keep strength, but that doesn't automatically mean that I'll keep running form, and I'll keep that dynamic skills and that proprioception skills. That's not how exercise works. You have to spend time practicing in the disciplines that you want to get better at. So I'm structuring my time around all of those things. You can track power. So I've got a Garmin, so I'll be able to sort of track the changes in power. I've got a Watt bike, which means I can track power changes through the pedal sensors. And that it's not the same as running, obviously, but there is a sort of a relationship between running and cycling when you look at how they work together. But it's a metric that I can use to track whether my power is changing. And I think, in a funny kind of way, I'm expecting that this process, this training block, will be harder in a way than what I've done with the marathon, the ultra training, because it's more with the ultra. The challenge was mentally going out for hours and hours and hours and running through. I was going to say pain, but it's not pain. Running through that just stiffness that's not very enjoyable, but you're going to be all right the next day. Whereas now, I don't know if you've ever done like flat out sprints on a bike, or really heavy strength training. That's a different type of hard. that is quite intense physical effort and it's just not very nice. The good thing is it's very short. So if I'm sure if I can run for 6 or 7 hours, wishing I was stopping with the hailstones running down my back, I can lift some heavy weights for a few minutes at a time or do some 30-second intervals. But it does feel very different when you're doing it. But so it will be interesting to see how hard mentally I find that, and pushing myself harder physically on those things, because I haven't had to do that so much with the marathon training. You're not pushing yourself physically hard. So there is a difference in terms of that training. How I recover is going to be unknown because I don't know. Um, Again, it's quite intense training. You do need longer recovery, but that's something that I'll just play around with and just adapt. That's just about listening to your body. There's quite easy signs that you can track for recovery. So that's quite straightforward, really. But it's just a bit of an unknown in terms of what that routine looks like. And how I enjoy it, that's another unknown. But again, I always keep a diary of things, so I'll know more about that once I've done it. And just how I feel. Like I say, I want to feel fitter, I want to feel stronger. And I didn't get that feeling in between the long runs. So I'm hoping that I'll find that. A big goal as well is to just for my tendons to be good and let me do it. So the power work, I'll be very careful about how I build that up and very slow. And again, that's listening to your body and just making sure that you build up that intensity gradually and you allow that recovery so that I don't get any issues flaring up with my Achilles or my hamstrings. So yeah, because that's the key thing. And I think that's got to be a feature now of the way I train permanently, because I know tendon issues are just a very high risk factor in menopause. And I think the last thing I'm expecting to change is my body composition, because and body composition means I was going to say more fat, less muscle. I'm hoping for the other way around. So you would expect a body composition change to be more muscle and less fat as a result of that. And that's because more strength training is going to build more muscle. And the high intensity stuff, the real sort of it's quite short intensity ones, are actually very well known to assist with increasing the way you metabolize fat and glucose and changing the way you burn fuel on a cellular level in peri and postmenopausal women. So that really should help with me becoming a better fat burner and using that fat burning, capability better through the way you're actually training your body to at this much higher level. So, and I'll be doing a little bit more of that. It's only small doses, but I'll be doing more of that in those really top um, sort of heart rate zones, and that does help with body composition. And then overall, because of the less sort of medium level stress of just long runs, I won't have the same inflammatory response that I had after those. So I think that's going to help with body composition. I won't have to go to Tesco's and buy 3 bags of Dolly mixtures and 1 bag of jelly babies to get me around a run. And so it's going to be easier because a lot of my training sessions will be a lot shorter for me to just be much more regimented and have more consistency in my diet day to day, rather than having these days where I'm having to put some big carbohydrate spikes in there to help fuel the longer runs. And I just did find that just messed up the balance for me a bit. It doesn't with all my clients, so it's quite individual really in terms of how the different nutrition changes affect you. But that was my experience anyway. So that's the project, and that hopefully, if you've seen enough of this, is really why I think that it's actually important to look at speed and not just distance, because there's a lot of aspects of the way you would train for that from an aging and a health and longevity point of view are, I hate to say superior, but I'm going to say it because they do give you things that the long running training won't give you. But that doesn't mean, it's all personal. It doesn't mean one thing's better than another. And as I said, it just means that I'll be in different training cycles going through the seasons so that I have the best of both, and it's a really lovely way to actually vary your training so you don't get bored, but get yourself in this progressive cycle so that things are improving all the time. Because I think how lovely to be 54 and feel like, well, I'll just get better in 6 months and then the next 12 months. And I feel very confident that I will be able to. Because of the way that training is going to be structured and what those goals are and how you progress this over time. But I think, it will be an important component of what I do on a regular basis moving forwards, because I want my body to function in that way. And I was running, I've said this before, you might have heard me, but I was running a few months ago, and this girl who was probably in her 30s ran towards me, and she looked amazing. And when I say look amazing, I mean her posture was really upright. She looked really strong. She was running, her form was fantastic. She was really bouncy and, elastic, and it just looked really, really nice. And then a few minutes later, someone who was probably about my age just sort of came, like collapsed in, sort of shuffling into the floor. And just the comparison really stuck in my mind. And I thought, no, I want to be that really upright, strong, bouncy runner. And that's from good elastic tendons. It's from having power in your legs. It's having a higher VO2 max. It's being stronger, bigger muscles. And that's what I want. So that's what it's for. And yeah, so I'm looking forward to doing that. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. So do ask me any questions if you want to. Some of my clients are joining me there. I've got most people are still finishing off marathons, and I will allow them to have a little bit of recovery time before I pull them in to work on the speed and the power. But if you do want to join us, I do have a couple of places available for it. And if you want to just book a quick call with me, then just DM me after this and I'll send you a link and I'll just tell you more about it and we can have a bit of a chat and I'll just explain how the coaching program works if you fancy hearing about that and maybe thinking about working on your strength and power goals over the next few months. What did I say? I said it was 90 days. So like 3 to 4 months. But anyway, that's the plan. So I'll let you know how I go and what I do with it. And I'll look forward to seeing you on some of these videos again in the not too distant future. Enjoy the rest of your day and I'll speak to you soon.